Welcome to TheGaGG.com. I'm Luke Stevens, your head gun and gear guy here. Today, this video is Glockology 101, Basic Disassembly and Assembly of the Glock. Yes, I said Glockology, 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 Glockology. We're going to continue saying this word until it catches on out there. Basic disassembly and assembly of any gun is important to the maintenance, inspection, and cleaning of that gun. It's a skill that every gun owner must have. So let's get started. Now, the first thing you do before engaging a gun, picking it up, touching it even, is to make sure that that gun is on safe. The first step in making sure that that gun is safe is making sure that it's always pointed in a safe direction. No camera crew or any person or anybody is to my left, so this is a safe direction for this purposes of this demonstration. Now, to make a gun safe, it's a very simple three-step procedure. Step one, you want to remove the magazine. The magazine release is this button that is on the pistol grip or middle of the frame behind the trigger of your Glock. You push that in and your magazine will come out. All right? Lay your magazine off to the side. The second step with ensuring that a firearm is made safe is you want to slide the slide fully to the rear. You want to visually inspect and make sure that there's no round in that chamber, that there are no rounds caught up in there that were left in there from previous firing. Return the slide to battery, and then you want to point the gun in a safe direction and pull the trigger. Now, just so we all know, it is a very common thing when people check a gun to make it safe that they forget the magazine. And let's say that you forgot to remove your magazine first and there happened to be a round or two in there. So Luke, what's going to happen? Is my gun safe or not? Well, I take my slide back. If it is actually an empty magazine, the gun will stay in breech. The sad thing is, if it's not an empty magazine, the slide will return forward normally. When you've inspected it, thinking that there's no round in there, and you go to pull the trigger, you're not going to hear this noise. You're going to hear a real bang. And if you accidentally have not pointed that in a safe direction, as we've indicated, you may have bad juju on your hand. So always make sure that you remove the magazine, visually inspect and verify that there's no round in the chamber. You can also look down and make sure there's no magazine in at the same time. Return it to battery, point in a safe direction, pull the trigger, the gun is now safe. Now, let's begin the disassembly of the Glock. The Glock breaks down into four simple parts. It's a very easy gun to field strip or disassemble, and it's important that you learn how to do this effectively. The first part of disassembling the Glock is to remove the slide from the frame. The way that you do that, you'll need to be able to grab on both sides these slide releases on both sides that have to be pushed down. They're under spring tension, and to properly pull them down, you actually have to take some tension off of them by pulling the slide back. Now, I've got big hands, and I can actually put this on my chest, pull the slide just barely back, like this, and then slide it forward. People with smaller hands, if they have larger hands, they really don't need to be handling a gun because they're probably an elephant. People with smaller hands a lot of times have to take and hold the slide back with some position like this and pull this down. The problem is the slide won't come off until you pull the trigger because it's not much room you have there before you re-engage and activate that firing pin. So if for some reason you go to take that slide off and it doesn't want to go forward, just reach down, pull that trigger, making sure the gun's in a safe direction. Now you have two of the main parts. You have the frame or receiver, which the lower part is predominantly plastic. You have a few metal pieces that are inside of the frame here. And you have the slide and its components that we're going to break down. So this is what we're going to work with next. But the slide is a lot heavier. You'll know that it's the slide versus the frame because it's almost all metal. The next step in disassembling the Glock is to remove this recoil spring. Now, this is a Gen 4 Glock, and the recoil spring here actually has an inner spring and an outer spring, so you can see two different springs there. If for some reason you only see one spring, don't worry, you haven't shot the other spring off sometime in the past. It's probably a Gen 3 or earlier Glock, and that's okay. To remove the recoil spring, you just put tension up against the back of the recoil spring where it sits on this lug, forward slightly, pull the spring out, and it should release easily. Now, on this Gen 4 spring, there's actually a black side and a silver side. That's not going to be on every spring, and Gen 3 springs actually look a little bit different than this. But remember this when you reassemble it, because the black side is going to go forward, if you noticed when we took it out, and the metal side or silver side is going to go back into that lug. So now we have the recoil spring out. We have two of our parts that we need to get out, and the last is the barrel. Now the barrel is what's attached to this lug that we just took the recoil spring out. If you just grab that lug, push it forward a little bit, lift it out, you can slide the barrel out. And there you go. You have a properly filled strip Glock. You have the frame or the lower receiver, you have the recoil spring, you have the barrel, and you have the slide. Let's reassemble it. Now, disassembling a gun is what every 2-year-old loves to do. Us adults, we have to put them back together. So this is the next step that we've got to take in our disassembly and assembly. To do that, let's start with the slide again, okay, and the barrel. Now the barrel has a flat side to that kind of square box on the end of it, and it has this kind of hooky looking side to it. That's a lug, okay, and this is just the flat top that sits up into the top of the slide. Now what you want to do is you want to take the flat side with the barrel kind of pointing down into the hole that you're going to push it down into, and you're going to drop it down into the gun like that, and then just push that barrel all the way to the back so that it rests as far back as possible. Next, you're going to take your recoil spring and remember your black end versus your silver end. So the black end is going to go into the hole that sits right up underneath the barrel in the slide, and you're just going to take your finger and apply a little bit of pressure until you let it rest back into that lug. Now you'll know when it's sitting in the lug properly because it'll kind of catch down in there. There's actually a top ledge to this lug, and if you sit it on that, it's not engaged properly. There's no real pressure on it. Once you seat it down in there, you'll know it. You'll feel it the first time. And then the final step to assembly is really simple. If you'll notice, your slide has a couple of cutouts here. Those cutouts on either side are your slide rails. They actually run the full length up your slide for the most part. Well, the slide rails actually go over these slide guides. There's two in the front on each side and two in the back, one on each side. And you want to remember the rear sight is going to go on first. If you put it this way, you're going to have a non-functional gun if you can actually get it on. If you actually get it on, call me because I want to see that. That's going to be an interesting one. So take the end with the rear sight, put it in front of the furthest slide rails toward the barrel end of the gun, slide it into those slide rail slots, push it all the way back, engage the slide all the way back, let it go forward, pointing in a safe direction, pull the trigger. Now the way you properly function test a Glock after you've completed its reassembly is real simple. Engage the slide, bring it forward. Point in a safe direction, pull the trigger. you should hear a firm click. Engage the slide with the trigger pulled. Don't release the trigger. Let the slide go forward. You should hear no click. You should just hear the slide move back into position, and then slowly release the trigger until you hear a small click. And then when you pull the trigger back, you hear a big click. Now that's a fully functional Glock at that point in time. The gun should work properly, and it should be safe. I'm Luke Stevens, your head gun and gear guy at TheGaGG.com.